From Deji Olatunji to Mike Tyson, Jake Paul's boxing career is setting the tone for influencer boxing. But is this tone changing? For a minute, it looked like the script had been ripped to shreds. Or had it? Is Jake Paul genuinely learning from his fights, sharpening his skills against tougher opponents? Or is he just finding craftier ways to play the game, play his audience, and maybe even play the sport of boxing itself? Let's pick up where we left off after the Fury loss and dig into what happened next in Jake Paul's career.
76-73 to the winner by split decision, Tommy.
One loss. That's all it took for everyone to try and flip the script. Tommy Fury exposed Jake Paul. The problem child was supposedly humbled, the whole circus tent apparently collapsing. But what if that L wasn't an ending, just a very clever pivot? What if losing actually forced the setup to get smarter, sneakier even? Since that night, the opponents haven't exactly been screaming top-tier contender, have they? Losing to Tommy Fury? Yeah, that was definitely a setback. Paul himself called it humbling. But in the world of Jake Paul, even a loss can be twisted into a win. He actually claimed the defeat made his brand bigger, showed his human side. Pretty slick PR, or was he being real? What happened right after was the key. Was he going to demand an immediate rematch with Fury, the guy who supposedly exposed him? Or would Team Paul switch gears to a more manageable comeback? The answer didn't take long. Instead of chasing the toughest fight out there to prove he was legit, the focus shifted. And this is where that setup theory kicks right back in. See, a true contender, when they get stung by a loss, usually wants to fix it by fighting someone just as tough or tougher. What we saw instead felt like a super controlled course correction, something designed to build back momentum and get the Jake Paul show back on the road. Not really a genuine hunt for boxing street cred. They needed to grab back control of the story, and fast. And then came Nate Diaz, August 2023, a UFC legend, famous for being incredibly tough and having a massive fan base. But, and this is a big but, an aging MMA fighter with 0 pro boxing matches under his belt. On paper, it was another classic Jake Paul special. Huge name, massive pay-per-view numbers practically guaranteed, and a style in the boxing ring that was always going to favor Paul. Diaz's MMA striking is great in the cage, sure, but it's not polished boxing. His main weapon was his toughness, meaning he could take a beating and make the fight look like a war, even if the win was hardly up for grabs.
After 10 rounds of action, we have a unanimous decision. All 3 in favor of the winner, the problem child, Jake Paul.
Jake Paul secured a unanimous decision victory over Nate Diaz, delivering a dominant performance that included a knockdown in the 5th round. Diaz, being Diaz, was tough as nails and talked trash, which made for good TV. But was it really a step up in boxing skill for Paul? Or was it just a perfect rebound, cooked up to look good? Critics immediately jumped on Diaz's lack of boxing experience. And while Diaz walked away with a huge payday, probably more than any UFC fight, the match didn't do much to quiet down to folks who see Paul's career as a string of carefully chosen exhibitions, not real sporting contests. The setup wasn't just about winning. It was about staying marketable, keeping up that illusion of progress. Diaz, the tough MMA hero making his boxing debut, fit that narrative perfectly. He was a name, a warrior, but he wasn't a seasoned boxer. After the Diaz show, Team Paul announced a pretty surprising switch-up: fights against actual boxers to get more experience. First up was Andre August in December 2023, then Ryan Borland in March 2024. Now, on the surface, this looked like they were listening to the critics, maybe trying to get a bit more legit. August had a 10-1-1 record. Borland was 17-2. Sounds decent, doesn't it? Well, let's take a closer look. Andre August, while his record looked okay, had only fought once in the 4 years before he stepped in with Paul.
Go live from Orlando, Florida.
He's always had good footwork. He usually uses it to circle out, and now he's bouncing in and bouncing out.
They both landed hard.
Be careful about ducking down.
Your winner by knockout, the problem child, Jake Paul.
Paul knocked him out cold in the first round with a spectacular uppercut. Ryan Borland, similar story. He was sold as an experienced pro, but his recent activity and the kind of guys he'd fought weren't exactly top tier. Paul got rid of him in the first round too.
The brightest of his career. Here we go. Cruiserweight division, 8 rounds. The crowd already breaking into and there's the right that lands. Borland right now looks dazed and confused. Jake looking to end it right here and right now. And they've stopped it. Round 1, knockout.
Inicial, el vencedor por nocaut técnico, your winner by way of technical knockout, el gallo de Dorado, Jake, the problem child, Paul.
So, were these real learning experiences, or were they just carefully picked opponents, chosen to give Paul some flashy knockouts and beef up his record against real boxers without any actual danger? If we're sticking with the giant setup theory, the second option seems way more likely. These fights did a few things. They let Paul say he was taking the traditional boxing path, they gave him awesome knockout clips for his social media, and they kept him busy while the bigger, money-making events were being cooked up. They were like boxing's version of a gentle sparring session, but sold as major steps forward. And how quickly he won only made people wonder more. Were these guys really good enough to test him, or were they picked because they were likely to go down? Then came the bombshell announcement that made waves way outside of boxing. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Originally slated for July 2024, it eventually went down in November 2024. You had a 27-year-old Paul, who'd be 28 by fight night, squaring off against a 58-year-old boxing icon who hadn't fought professionally in almost 20 years. This wasn't just a fight, it was a pop culture earthquake, a Netflix special, and a monster payday. But what did it really mean for Paul's boxing credibility? A lot of people, especially boxing purists, called it a joke, a lose-lose for Paul's reputation. Beating an almost 60-year-old Tyson wouldn't prove much. Losing would be a disaster. Tyson himself had some pretty serious health scares before the rescheduled fight, like a bleeding ulcer that made him lose a ton of weight and need blood transfusions. Tyson even said he almost died. These issues really cast a shadow over whether this was a genuine sporting event.
Mark Calloy warning Paul not to measure. Well, he measured him, and then he hit him with a right and left. Tyson coming forward.
Oh, wow.
Tyson's final victory was against Clifford Etienne, the show of respect.
Jake El Gallo Paul.
Paul won by unanimous decision after 8 rounds. Tyson, even with his age and recent health problems, managed to go the distance. After the fight, Paul claimed he gave Tyson a boxing lesson. Tyson, ever the professional in defeat, pointed to his health struggles before the fight and said just going 8 rounds at his age was an achievement. From the setup point of view, the Tyson fight was the ultimate power move. It guaranteed insane viewership and a ton of revenue, no matter how good the actual fight was. It kept Paul's name splashed across mainstream headlines, linking him with one of the biggest names in boxing history. The result, a decision win for Paul, was probably the best outcome for business. It avoided the bad look of bullying an old man with a knockout, but still added a W to Paul's record against his famous opponent, yet even if that opponent was way past his prime. Of course, all the usual talk about Paul's fights being fixed or rigged came roaring back with this one. MVP Promotions, Paul's company, has always denied these things, saying all the doubt is just a backhanded compliment to his skills. And now, the story rolls on with the announcement of Jake Paul versus Julio César Chávez Jr., penciled in for June 28, 2025. Chavez Jr. is a former WBC middleweight champion, and he's the son of an absolute boxing legend. On paper, this looks like Paul's most legit boxing opponent so far, a former world champ with a name that means something in the sport. Oscar De La Hoya, whose Golden Boy Promotions is involved, has even hinted that if Paul wins this, his dreams of a world title might not be so crazy after all. But, surprise, surprise, when you look at the details, it gets a bit more complicated. And it fits right into that setup storyline. Chavez Jr., while he'll be around 39 for the fight, has had a career full of ups and downs, problems with discipline, and long stretches without fighting. He hasn't fought much in recent years, and notably lost to former UFC fighter Anderson Silva back in 2021. The same Anderson Silva that Jake Paul beat later on. His record is 54 wins, but his best days were probably more than 10 years ago. So, is Chavez Jr. a dangerous, in-form ex-champion? Or is he another famous name, picked carefully because he's so well-known but might be a bit vulnerable? Critics, like fellow boxer Ryan Garcia, have been saying for a while that Paul just cherry-picks older or compromised opponents. Garcia's comment, "There's only so many 40-year-old dudes out there in the world that have a name," feels like it hits the nail on the head here. The betting odds are already massively in Jake Paul's favor. This fight feels like it's designed to get Paul a name boxer on his record. Someone with a real title history, but whose current shape and recent fights suggest he's a long way from his peak. It's a fight that lets Paul say he's taken on a real champion while keeping the actual risk pretty low. The big question's pretty simple. Is Jake Paul actually getting better as a boxer, or is he just getting better at managing how we see him? That Tommy Fury loss could have been a real wake-up call, a moment where he realized that YouTube fame and easy opponents weren't going to cut it if he really wanted to conquer boxing. Since the Tommy Fury loss, Jake Paul's boxing journey has morphed into a masterclass in strategic spectacle. Fights against Nate Diaz, Mike Tyson, and the upcoming Julio César Chávez Jr. bout reveal a consistent playbook. Leverage big names for maximum buzz while cherry-picking opponents, often past their prime or new to boxing, who pose minimal threat. This tactic fuels the narrative of progress, letting Paul claim he's climbing the ranks, yet it conveniently skirts the sport's elite. Critics argue the real skill he's honing isn't in the ring, but in the game, becoming a maestro of boxing promotion, orchestrating hype and headlines over battling top-tier talent. The setup hasn't just arrived, it's evolved, proving Paul's world thrives on the show, not the struggle.